Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger. We are inching closer to Georgia's appearance in the college football playoff on New Year's Day in the Sugar Bowl. We're excited about all of that next week. We are inching closer to Christmas. Hope you're getting ready. Around our home, we're scrambling to make sure that we are. We got college football playoff action beginning tonight. And on today's show, in addition to all that, there's a pretty, I think, major transfer rumor as it relates to Georgia. We're covering that. There is more rumblings and grumblings about what the quarterback situation will be for Georgia in the college football playoff, essentially confirming what we sort of already know. And yet, nonetheless, I think there is still something to be read and sort of seen from all of that. So we are jam-packed, very busy. Jeff Sentell stops by, too. Official picks on all four of the first-round college football playoff games as well. So we're going to try to cover all of that with you over the course of our time, and then we'll get ready to roll into a weekend where, as we said before, between the holiday and the football, there is a lot going on. So what do you say we get it started? It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Got a couple of reports yesterday about Georgia quarterback Carson Beck, and I thought the reaction from some Georgia fans to it was kind of interesting. And obviously, I think it speaks to what Georgia's about to go through here with the college football playoff. So let me start with the one that I saw first. I don't know which one actually appeared first. This is just the one I saw first. And then we'll kind of talk about what all this means. Pete Nakos, who's breaking a lot of news these days for On3, the headline says, Georgia quarterback Carson Beck's expected to miss the college football playoff quarterfinal. So basically mentioning the Sugar Bowl game coming up against whoever they'll be playing. We'll find out tonight when Notre Dame takes on Indiana. Reading from Nakos and On3, what we read is that Georgia quarterback Carson Beck injured his UCL and his right elbow during the SEC championship earlier this month, and sources tell On3 that Beck is not expected to play in the college football playoff quarterfinal. So what Nakos mentions there for On3, big national publication, is just the one game, that Carson Beck is not expected to play in that game for the Sugar Bowl. And as I told you before, a lot of Georgia fans read that story, saw the online chatter about this yesterday, and their reaction to it was, hold on, wait a second. Don't we already know this? Hasn't that already essentially been confirmed? Isn't that sort of treated as common knowledge among everybody? Like, why are we doing headlines about this? And why is this getting this sort of official breaking news treatment if it's something that everybody kind of already knew, which I think is certainly a fair question. But then we got maybe more information, or at least something somewhat new as it relates to this story from another publication, ESPN, who I guess around the same time, at least the same day, put out a headline that says, sources, Georgia preparing for a college football playoff without Carson Beck. So Nakos at On3 reports that Carson Beck is out for the Sugar Bowl. Mark Schlabach, Chris Lowe, two well-known reporters working together, write for ESPN.com yesterday. This came out last night, that Georgia's preparing to play the college football playoff without starting quarterback Carson Beck, who's exploring surgery options to repair an injury to the elbow on his throwing arm. Once again, this is sources telling this to ESPN. So the NACO story for On3 had Beck out for the Sugar Bowl. The ESPN story kind of takes it further last night, saying, according to Lowe and Schlabach, that Georgia's preparing to play without Beck for the entirety of the playoff. They go on to say that Beck's return this season is unlikely, according to sources, and that sophomore Gunner Stockton is expected to make his first college football start, obviously in that Sugar Bowl game. We later learned that from the reporting and all of this, that Beck right now hasn't been apparently with the team. And I think sometimes the details contained within a story may be more interesting or more important than the actual headline itself. Most Georgia fans are not surprised to hear that Beck won't play in the Sugar Bowl, and that there's a strong possibility that Beck might not play in the college football playoff at all. They essentially already assumed that was true. However, I do believe it is a notable detail that all of this now coming to light officially with the, I guess, reporting that Beck has been kind of exploring his medical options and not with the team as they've been practicing this week while he's doing that. I would say that's notable. You can decide for yourself what you think that means. We have seen injured players travel with Georgia to bowl games before. It'll be curious to find out, does Beck even attend the game in New Orleans if he's not playing? We all have those sort of memories of Stetson Bennett emerging as a national championship quarterback for Georgia in 2021. And I thought there was a really dignified posture taken by JT Daniels during all of that. When he was seen during every timeout, you would see JT like helping Stetson and showing Stetson what he was seeing on the sideline. And obviously it took a real, like I said before, kind of a dignity from JT to do that, because JT had been overtaken as the starting quarterback during the season, and yet he was still intent on helping Bennett during that playoff run, despite the fact that he knew next year he'd be playing for somebody else. He still sort of stood there and kind of, helped Stetson Bennett do his job. Will we see a similar image of Beck if he's not playing the Sugar Bowl? I guess right now we don't know that. It may be one of those questions that later on, Kirby Smart answers about Carson Beck. But I do think that all of this, the reporting that comes out, not playing in the Sugar Bowl or not playing in the college football playoff, not really with the team right now, exploring medical options, trying to find out, are you going to have surgery or not? I think all of this in a roundabout way is Georgia's signal that we're no longer talking about Carson Beck. Appreciate Carson Beck's contribution. Carson, obviously, as I said on X when the injury kind of stuff started coming out, he gave some really, I think, remarkable performances for Georgia this year. The Georgia Tech game stands out for me. Coming back on the field after the injury to help, the handoff that turned into the game-winning touchdown, that stands out for me. That Beck gave Georgia a lot here this year, but now that he's hurt and perhaps not with the team based on some of this reporting, now that all of that's going on, Georgia seems to want to be focused on who is here and who is ready to play and how you rally around that guy. And it is perhaps not a surprise at all in light of all of this and perhaps some of this now kind of being made official. It is not a surprise at all that Georgia seemingly is rallying around Gunner Stockton, the guy who came in and led them to victory against Texas. It's not surprising that the rallying around him continues just as intensely now, seemingly, as it was that day back in Atlanta to begin the month in the SEC championship. What we are led to believe is these Georgia players really like playing with Stockton, for Stockton, if you want to say it that way, that there is a level of belief here that's pretty strong. And yesterday, Jalon Walker, who's obviously the Butkus Award winner for Georgia, one of the best vocal leaders this team has, he made an appearance on the Paul Feinbaum show. We don't see a lot of Georgia players doing things like this, but Walker showed up on Feinbaum. The topic of Gunner Stockton came up, and Jalon, kind of speaking on behalf of the team as he does, talks about the fact that not only does he believe in Stockton right now, but he has been believing in Gunner for a very long time. I think if you're a Georgia fan sort of wondering what to expect from this Sugar Bowl that's upcoming and, who you might be playing and how that might go, what Jalon Walker says about Gunner Stockton, I think you're going to really like it. Take a listen to this.
When Gunner Stockton stepped on the field, I had no doubt. I came in with Gunner together as freshmen, and I always had confidence in him. He's played big-time football because he sees it every day. I mean, he does a great job preparing himself mentally and physically of what he has to do for the game, and I feel like he'll be fine. I feel like our team will have Gunner's back no matter what happens, and I feel like we'll be put in the best position by him in offense.
I've told you a lot over the course of the last couple of weeks that, I have been honest about I'm just not quite so sure what to expect from Georgia in these playoffs. And you look at Georgia in its best moments this year, sometimes against really, very high level of competition. You look at Georgia sometimes at its not quite so best this year against, in some cases, lesser competition, and you're sort of trying to make sense of how all these data points sort of match together and what kind of certainty that gives you about the version of Georgia that you'll see in the playoff. I've said before, I try to be as honest and candid as I can possibly be. I have just not been quite so sure. Not quite so sure what to expect from UGA. Not quite so sure how this season's going to conclude. And I'm sort of okay not knowing. I'm sort of okay, kind of approaching this upcoming playoff with mystery. But as a fan of Georgia, and I've got my Georgia sweatshirt on today, as a fan of Georgia, well, of course, I want to see Georgia win. And, of course, I want to go into a game like that with really kind of strong, intense belief that Georgia can and will win. Of course, that's what I want. And so, how do you gain that confidence if you're a fan wanting to have that going into what we're about to see? starting on January 1st. Well, when you listen closely to a guy like Jalon Walker, it's easy to start kind of getting, caught up in that momentum a little bit. Like there's a cynical part of me, a skeptical part of me that doesn't want to make too much of the most recent data point, doesn't want to just sort of join the suddenly throng of people who are just so sure that everything has just worked out just so perfectly for Georgia. Now that Gunner Stockton's stepped in, I'm a little too, I think, contrarian by nature, just to sort of buy into that too quickly. But no matter how cynical or skeptical sometimes a part of my brain might want to be, when you hear Jalon Walker lay it out, not in the sort of typical trained, sort of coach speak, player type jargon of, oh, we just believe in everybody. That's not a generic statement from Walker. That's a specific statement of we specifically believe in Gunner Stockton, and we have believed in him. Jalon would say, have believed in him for a very long time. All of a sudden, if you're a Georgia fan who's just not really been quite so sure of what you've seen from UGA over the totality of these last 13 games, it becomes a little bit easier to buy and borrow Jalon Walker's confidence there and all of a sudden believe, well, maybe this team really is as set up to succeed as Jalon Walker describes right there, because we're also led to believe that Jalon Walker is nowhere near the only player to feel that way. And in fact, I thought you got a passionate sort of statement about that after the SEC championship when Stockton had done what he did in that game and kind of helped contribute in a mighty way to Georgia's victory. I thought the praise that Kirby Smart gave for Gunner in the post-game press conference, I thought it was really poignant too, speaking on behalf of a lot of those Georgia players who just really think this is the sort of dude that you want to play for and you want to play with. Walker said it well a moment ago. Here was Kirby Smart's turn to sort of say the same thing when you want to go back to that night after the SEC championship, Kirby Smart from earlier this month.
I mean, the players believe in Gunner. They love Gunner. The juice that he brought and the passion and energy. And he lives with 3 or 4 of those guys. I don't know, Drew and Oscar and some of them. And it was like it gave us an added boost of energy. They were fired up. Man, the kid played just tough as nails. I mean, and he hadn't got to play much this year. That's the hardest part is you don't get a chance to play these guys. The Florida State game is probably the most he's played. But can't say enough about his toughness, character, whatever you want to say. The guy's a phenomenal leader. He made some good plays, and I think everybody else rose up around him.
Isn't that what you want your quarterback to do? Be the kind of galvanizing force that causes everybody to rise up around him. And when you start trying to investigate more deeply about why it is that Georgia does believe in Gunner so much, I'm always interested in words that get repeated in Kirby Smart clips, things that get said more than once, because you might be led to believe that some of those type of things have maybe some additional meaning. And we certainly got some of that from Kirby right there. Did you hear how many times, I counted twice at least, that Kirby Smart used the word toughness? Gunner's a tough guy. He's got toughness. That's the kind of thing that other players believe in. It's the kind of thing that makes other players, happy about their quarterback, because this is a guy who's playing that position with the same toughness that Georgia's required to play all the other positions with too. And we're sort of, kind of led to believe that that's what Gunner Stockton is for Georgia right now. So the overall bottom line for me on this entire topic is this. A lot of Georgia fans were left wondering, well, how come we're getting these official reports, right now that Stockton's out for that Carson Beck is out for the Sugar Bowl for certain and likely for the entirety of the college football playoff? Georgia fans on message boards and social media and things like that were saying, don't we already know that? Haven't we already heard that? And for the most part, we had. But I think this, from whatever sources are putting that out there, I think this is meant to be an indication that it's time to turn the page and it's time to move on. And you can thank, perhaps, Carson Beck for his contribution for Georgia this season, but unfortunately, Beck has suffered an injury. And obviously, we wish Carson really well as he tries to figure out what's next for him on that and get healthy again and maybe even moving on for the NFL draft if that's what he chooses to do. But for Georgia, there is business to be taken care of right now on the field. And the new leader for Georgia on the field as they do that will be Gunner Stockton. We don't really know a lot about Stockton on the field. We've only seen him, at least in extended action, in the SEC championship here this year. But the players who see him at practice every day, who live around him throughout the week, who are just kind of a part of his life and he is a part of theirs, as Jalon Walker says, they believe in him. They are confident in him. They know he'll be capable of getting that job done. At least that's what they say. And if that's what they believe, who are any of us to argue with that? My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. We're happy to have you with us, no matter how you get to us. Video, radio, podcast, Apple, Spotify, everything else. Just glad to have you with us as a part of the program today. College football playoff begins tonight. We're all over that, of course, looking to see who Georgia's playing and looking to be sort of entertained by some games that we get a chance to watch stress-free without having to worry too much about Georgia for a change, which is kind of a nice thing. Also, here's what else is nice. Our friends from Kroger getting you ready to go for a wonderful Christmas season. You've got 12 merry days of deals coming up here. You can clip a new Kroger coupon each day, and you can enjoy savings, for a lot of time here throughout the month here. Plus, if you're a Kroger Boost member, you get the chance to save even more. So make sure you check that out today, Kroger.com, or stop by your local Kroger for a lot more on that. A lot of fun stuff happening with Kroger here during this holiday season, so make sure you check out all of that. We also want you to check us out here today. We got a lot to do over our time. Before we're done, y'all, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this because we are primarily, obviously, a football show. But what Georgia basketball is doing right now is really remarkable. What that program is doing, what that team is doing, is really remarkable. We need to spend some time on that. We'll give you our official picks for all of the first-round college football playoff games. I'm looking forward to doing that, including the one tonight that is of special interest for Georgia fans. We've got Jeff Sentell here coming up, too. I'll also tell you, as a lead-in to Jeff here in a moment, as we go around the doghouse, what I think a really hot topic is going to be for Georgia fans kind of watching this 2025 roster, perhaps coming together at the same time we're getting ready for this year's college football playoff. We'll do all that here coming up in a moment. Before I fully transition to Around the Doghouse, let me also give a reminder here, too, that right now we are kind of in those final moments of folks making plans to be a part of our DawgNation invasion. You know this. Georgia's on its way to New Orleans. We'll find out is it Notre Dame or is it Indiana, but the Dogs are already locked in and ready to go, and Gunner Stockton's ready to lead. And if you're ready to follow Gunner and the rest of these Dogs lead, then you got to go and be a part of our DawgNation invasion tailgate and the big event taking place there, brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, Dr. Pepper, Kroger, and R.S. Andrews. Of course, our friends from Atlanta Sports Trips, too. They're helping plan all this for us. The Friday night party the night before the game, that's also New Year's Eve. It's actually not Friday night, but it is New Year's Eve night. I'm used to the Saturday stuff. The night before the game is New Year's Eve. We got a big New Year's Eve party. We got a big, kind of all-inclusive tailgate the day of the game, which includes the beverage and the food, all that great stuff while supplies last. One of these really cool DawgNation Invasion T-shirts, which I think looks awesome. We're celebrating all of that. That's going to be just a ton of fun. And we've even got great accommodations for you if you need a place to stay and stuff like that. Our friends at Atlanta Sports Trips want to help book that for you, either a 2 or 3 night stay at the Sheraton French Quarter. That's a beautiful hotel right there in the heart of it all in New Orleans. As I said before, great party on New Year's Eve, the night before the game, and the big tailgate the day of the game. All of this powered by our friends at Atlanta Sports Trips and brought to you in part by Academy Sports and Outdoors, Dr. Pepper, Kroger, and R.S. Andrews. So make sure you check out DawgNation.com/tailgate. for more on that. That's DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. Now, with that said, we'll get ready to go around the doghouse here today, presented by our friends at Zagoria Law. And when I bring on Jeff Sentell here in a moment, what we're going to talk about, one of the things anyway, is the ongoing discussion about Georgia and what it seems to be more intently pursuing the transfer portal than anything else. Now, we know Georgia's got needs at defensive back, and Georgia's at least entertained the thought of a quarterback. You had Dylan Lonergan came in for a visit, although Lonergan has since made a pledge to Boston College. You've got some possibility for Georgia at certain position groups, but the one thing that we're seeing for sure is that Georgia is really, really interested in the wide receiver position. The biggest name that sort of seems to still, kind of be floating here in the ether is Dane Key, the former Kentucky Wildcat. Now, we're led to believe that Key is going to visit Nebraska here this weekend. A former position coach at Kentucky is now at Nebraska, so there's a little bit of a tie there on that. But even with that Nebraska visit taking place, I think the thought is that Georgia's in a pretty good spot for Key, perhaps battling Ole Miss, but maybe really kind of making Key sort of a primary target for Georgia in this portal here right now, we're at least led to believe. But that's not the only thing that's maybe happening for Georgia here right now. We started a show earlier this week by mentioning Zachariah Branch, the, I think, just electric receiver from USC, and the early chatter that maybe Georgia could be a factor for Branch and his brother Zion Branch as they get ready to transfer and leave USC. We've got apparently more details on some of this today, too, because as Matt Zenitz from CBS Sports and 24/7 has reported, the current belief is that USC star wide receiver Zachariah Branch and his brother, Trojan safety Zion Branch, are going to take a visit to Georgia. So all of a sudden, this may be getting real fast. That Branch, who is about as dynamic as anybody could pursue here, is at least serious enough about Georgia that he might take that Georgia visit, and his brother Zion could be coming along too. Now, we've already kind of set our piece on this. Sometimes you sort of think of like kind of package deal type thing, not exactly being Georgia style, but Georgia does have a needed defensive back, and it sounds like there is at least some belief that Branch might be able to fill that, although Zachariah is clearly the more notable of the two here right now. There's maybe some thought that Zion could also be a contributor, as a defensive back. There's, kind of previous ties with coaching staffs, whether it be James Coley recruiting Branch, when he was, at Texas A&M, or Dante Williams now at Georgia, formerly being at USC. There is some thought here that there is some real ties for Branch in Georgia, and this might be one of those things that could have a possibility of happening. We don't always think of Georgia being the kind of big spender in NIL or hard bargain negotiator in situations like this. Oftentimes it seems like other programs are, whether you want to call it more aggressive, more desperate, sometimes that's the case. But Georgia may also have a little bit of money left over in the budget after what went down with Justice Terry. If we're just being completely candid, maybe there's a chance that's true. So maybe the Branch thing is at least real enough to consider, given the fact that a pretty respected reporter here in the case of Matt Zenitz is saying that the Branches may take a visit to Georgia. So we'll certainly keep our eye on that. And I guess I saw, is this true? Did J. Michael Sturdivant, is he going to Florida? That's another name. The guy from UCLA that might be visiting. Apparently now he's already found his home. He may be going to Florida. Did I see that correctly? So you got a lot going on as it relates to that. But Georgia hoping for good news on Key and perhaps getting a visit from one of the most coveted names in the portal, regardless of position, and his brother, who may be a contributor here at UGA too, if he were to come. So let's watch that. We'll also talk to Jeff Sentell more about that here coming up in a moment. And we'll also call that Around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. Now, Zagoria Law, we've told you before, really kind of a unique company in that they are dedicated to a very narrow focus within the law, which I think is a really good thing because the law is intricate, it's complicated, and the more you specialize, it's almost like a medical field or something like that, the more you specialize in one area, the more expertise that you're going to gain. And that's what our friends at Zagoria Law have done for a unique type of personal injury case, those who've been injured, bitten by a dog, knocked over, hurt by a dog that wasn't theirs. And you see these kinds of stories in the news all the time, and it's always a really scary thing to read the details about this. But if something like this has happened to you, at a park, in your neighborhood, or wherever you might be, where something like this occurs, then we would say that you deserve potentially the same kind of compensation that you might get in any kind of personal injury situation when you've been wrongly harmed. So our friends at Zagoria Law are dedicated to serving you in that particular situation. They are the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. That means they literally, and I mean literally in this case, wrote the book on how to win these types of cases. So if this is your story, if you or someone you loved has been hurt, bitten, knocked over, just injured in some way by a dog that wasn't maybe properly cared for by its owner, or maybe proper precautions weren't being taken, well, it's time to, have somebody fight for you to help you get what you deserve in a situation like that. So please give them a call. 833-GA-DOG-BITE. In this case, dog is spelled conventionally, D-O-G. 833-GA-DOG-BITE, or online, ZagoriaLaw.com. That's Z-A-G-O-R-I-A, ZagoriaLaw.com on that today. Great to have Zagoria Law as a part of Around the Doghouse for us here today. Now, let me give you a couple of ideas what's coming up later on our show here today. We, as I said before, are going to close out our week by looking at another story that's kind of emerging here for Georgia right now, which is there is a basketball team here in Athens led by Coach Mike White that is really playing some really good basketball. And it just so happens to coincide with a league, the SEC, that's probably better than it's ever been. So we're going to kind of touch on some of that because one way or another, as you kind of get past Christmas and kind of get into the month of January, as the Georgia college football playoff run will eventually come to an end, whether national championship or not, when you look at what's next on the calendar for UGA, a lot of Georgia fans will be very excited about the basketball team they perhaps get a chance to enjoy. They got another very big win last night. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. I think you're going to like that. We are also going to talk today about all of the first-round college football playoff games. I'm going to give you my official pick on those games. And, look, I'm going to be honest with you. There is a sort of a trend that's kind of been on my mind a lot. I've talked to you about this before, that when you look at kind of what the national semifinals have been and sort of the previous 10-year history of the college football playoff, one of the things that you see, a lot of favorites, right? You've seen some upsets in national championship games, not very much in the way of upsets when it comes to semifinals. Now, there are more teams and a little bit of a wider spread between some of these games, so maybe there's more chance at kind of craziness. We also kind of live in an era in which college football just sort of seen all kinds of chaos within the season. You might stand to reason that the college football playoff be very much the same way. I'm not quite so sure about that. We're going to talk about that some here today a little bit. But I'm also going to be very candid about the fact that I sort of think the vibe around this year's college football playoff is a little different than I would have expected to be. Tickets for these home games, not as hot as I might thought. Talk this week around the sport, it seemed to be more about some of the off-field stuff that's going on and how sort of ceaselessly crazy some of that appears to be. I think the sport would do really well by itself to have some very good games this weekend. The kind of thing that validates the decision to put teams like SMU and Indiana into the field, the kind of thing that reminds you that, hey, the game between the white lines is still strong no matter how odd the circumstances off the playing field are. So we're going to talk about that here coming up in a little bit. But in addition to that, Georgia big transfer a target, perhaps taking a visit here to UGA. You've got other things kind of going on there with these transfer rumors. And, by the way, some of Georgia's early enrollees have also apparently started their Georgia careers, too, getting ready to go through some of these bowl practices with Georgia. You've got that going down there as well. Am I being led to believe that we do not have Jeff Sentell ready to go here right now? Okay, we do have Jeff Sentell. All right, so I've tap danced long enough. We've got Jeff Sentell ready to go. So let's get ready to talk about all of that and more as we roll on here on a Friday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Let us say hello to Jeff Sentell. And Jeff, let's begin with you. Fun rumor that we addressed a moment ago. I guess not a rumor, I guess it's a report. Matt Zennett's 24/7 Sports suggesting that Zachariah Branch and his brother Zion, who's a defensive back, they may be taking a visit to Georgia. Is this real? Is there a legitimate chance that Georgia could be a factor for, in the case of Zachariah Branch, someone I would consider the most dynamic player available in the transfer portal? How legitimate is this discussion right now in your mind?
Yeah, Brandon, I'm going to tell you, good morning. Happy holidays to everybody. Brandon, that's what's kind of going about, man. I'll say this, and for some of the younger folks that have to go back to YouTube to try to remember what maybe the name Noel Devine or even maybe a Peter Warwick was like, that's what Zachariah Branch. I mean, it's kind of like I've got this image of him in my mind. And Brandon, I saw him at the Under Armour All-American game, and I was like, yada, 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 another 5-star. We see a lot of 5-stars, West Coast guy, really fast. You know, here in SEC country, you know, you're kind of used to that a little bit and it not meeting up the hype. Brandon, there were All-Americans like whiffing on him on punt returns and in coverage. It looked like those old school Bugs Bunny cartoons, you know, where Bugs Bunny throws one pitch and the guy swings 3 times and misses it because they can't touch it. They could not touch Zachariah. The fact that he's got a brother involved who also plays safety, that checks a major need as well for Georgia in this transfer portal kind of hopper right here. The things I've been told, they want to play together, and they're kind of seeking where they want to win. They want NFL development because thankfully USC is already kind of taking care of at least Zachariah with a lot of NIL coin to begin with. So they're kind of looking for that substantial football career, the big stage, playing against big opponents for that NFL development. Right now, Brandon, it seems like it's a mutually amazing kind of beneficial relationship to both parties.
Is this leftover Justice Terry money? Is that how we're in this discussion here right now? I mean, I hate to ask such a crude and uncouth question, but I mean, we don't have to dance around this. Georgia, obviously, you would presume, had a pretty big line item in its budget set to go to Terry. Terry found apparently more money at Texas, so you either got to, I guess, use it or lose it when it comes to some of this money. So is that why Georgia's a factor for a guy like Branch? Because this is not the typical transfer story we'd be talking about as it relates to Georgia. Is this leftover NIL money from a previous recruiting battle that's kind of made this more of a thing right now?
Brandon, I think it's probably, with great respect to his talent, this is one of those things when one of your friends in the friend group said, hey, let's go on this vacation. We found this deal. You kind of find that money. I think you find that money for a guy like Zachariah Branch, even if Georgia had signed Justice Terry, Brandon. You also got to look at it. It's not just kind of leftover Justice Terry money. There was money earmarked to maybe keep Jamal Jarrett in the fold. There was money earmarked to keep Julian Humphrey in the fold. Maybe some of those retention efforts aren't going as well as one might think. So, this is the thing, Brandon, where I know people kind of on the bingo card of absurdity for recruiting stories. Whenever you talk package deals with brothers, maybe brother package deals are a little bit better. You include a 5-star, but I think, Brandon, to honestly answer your question, you'd find the money for players like this, just kind of like when Caleb Downs jumped into the portal after Nick Saban retired. That's one of those things where you just go, if you got a donor list and you got, maybe in the telemarketing world, there's the do not call list.
Yeah.
Well, I think the collective has a please call list when in case of incredible upgrade position type, and a lot of people wonder if Zachariah is kind of a gadget guy. Like, does Georgia really need a gadget guy type receiver when the true needs are maybe the X receiver? Well, I think if used properly, Zachariah can give you production, maybe even more so than just that purely gadget guy. And, Brandon, I'm not trying to sound snarky here, but if there's a guy you want to throw a lot of screens out to in your offense, maybe Zachariah Branch would be the perfect example of that.
Yeah, at his best, that's certainly the case for sure. Now, am I led to believe this doesn't really have any kind of impact on the impending decision by Dane Key, the former Kentucky wide receiver, who I think we have visiting Nebraska here this weekend, but Georgia remains seemingly a pretty big factor there, that whatever Branch may or may not be doing is not really impacted so much by Key, and that's maybe not the same thing for some of these other receivers that Georgia's been sort of loosely tied to, that it seems like they're sort of all in on Key, Branch sort of a separate thing over here, and then if Key doesn't work out, they've got another group of receivers that they might be going after. Is that kind of your read on the other transfer situation for Georgia right now?
Brandon, I think Georgia's doing it maybe differently because they're just sitting there simply going, can this guy help us? Can this guy start for us? Can this guy upgrade things? And with Branch, I'm not trying to sound disrespectful to any member of the Georgia team here, but he would be an upgrade for Georgia at punt returner, kick returner as well. Those are probably his best skill sets. And I think Georgia is trying to be very cagey, Brandon, because when some of these teams start losing, maybe it's the Indianas, the Arizona States, the SMUs, the Penn States, the Tennessees, the Ohio States, there's going to be a flood, I think, of better players in that market as well. So, I don't think that, the one thing you don't want to see happen here, Brandon, is you don't want to see Georgia having leftover transfer portal money. Like, Key was kind of a major target from the moment he jumped in there with Georgia. And from what I've heard, he's just he'd made some promises about schools he was going to visit, and he's just following through this string of all of those visits. I don't know if you saw his Instagram. He had an Instagram post earlier this week, Brandon, where he took a picture of Sanford Stadium. It looked live and in the moment, and he dropped one of those emojis on there that kind of looked like it was, he was very happy to be there and maybe a little sad to leave at that time. So, Key's a guy, everybody's going to look at touchdowns. He only had 2 this year, but he had production, and more so than that, he had that ability to go get catches and go make some of those body control, big catch radius type receptions and plays. And man, Georgia just hasn't had that. The other thing I think, Brandon, I don't know if you've talked on it this week on your show yet, but the Vanderbilt ruling with Diego,
yeah.
Pava, that could have implications for other members of the Georgia roster. I know some folks are already wondering what that means for Colby Young's case. And I think maybe it's a little cart ahead of the horse here because Colby Young still needs to have his court date and get cleared. But should that happen, there's a year of junior college eligibility that was spent that Colby Young would even get back. And wouldn't that be interesting if Georgia already had one of those ex receivers that they didn't think they had coming back onto the team? And, Brandon, I think a Colby Young return or retention would be even better than like the pursuits on CJ Daniels and maybe Singleton and some of those other guys.
Yeah, we'll obviously have to see how the legal process plays out for him on that. And, of course, as we're talking about, spending an IL on this guy and maybe that guy and things of that nature, it's hard not to also bring this back to another hot topic around the sport this week, which is what the Alabama athletic director, Greg Byrne, the missive that he put out on social media, 6 paragraphs long. He is not the best user of social media. We would say that. A couple of missteps already this month alone. But what Byrne put out and the kind of almost panic that Alabama seemed to be expressing about its ability to kind of keep pace from an NIL standpoint with some of the teams that it's competing with, boy, it's hard not to notice that. Now, total honesty, we laughed at that some, but at the same time, Jeff, I had to say I'm scared to laugh at it too much because I can't quite be sure that any team is immune from what Alabama's concerned with right now, perhaps even Georgia too, where you just see some of these numbers getting bigger and bigger and bigger to the point that it almost becomes nonsensical, and you can't put a roster together if you pay so-and-so as much money as X school seems to be willing to pay them sometimes. So obviously Georgia fans, myself included, we kind of like the idea that Alabama's seemingly a little bit of in shambles here right now around all of this. But it also kind of speaks to a sport that's in disarray here at the moment, and most of us don't like that. What did you make of what Greg Byrne said this week, and what do you make of the fact that there is just so much craziness right now, both in terms of, players leaving one roster to go to another. Some of this impacts high school recruiting too. It seems like a real mess right now, and help does not seem to be on the way.
Yeah, Brandon, I don't know about you, but did it kind of seem a little bit more desperate than, somebody ringing a bell with a pot in front of the department store during holiday times? I think it's probably a reaction. Listen, anything that happens in that's a lot. Anything that happens.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, Jeff? I just want to make sure we're clear about this. So I made this graphic, and I did put all the Greg Byrne text on there, but I'm the one who added the Paris Hilton stop being poor picture. Let's just make sure we understand that Greg Byrne did not put Paris Hilton stop being poor on there. I'm the one that chose to add that. We just need to make sure we make that clear.
Brandon, that's a great graphic. If you wanted to sweeten that presentation, you probably should have put a picture of yellow wood or pressure-treated pine in the corner because, listen, having lived in that state, Brandon, the number one reaction from one program to anytime you see something extreme like that, it's because they're watching what their brother is doing. They're watching what their little brother or older brother is doing. And, Brandon, I'm going to tell you, and this speaks to my greater point, man, Auburn is spending. They're spending for QB1, QB2, QB3. It looks like they're spending for wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because they got Mr. Coleman there as their number one receiver. And that's a thing where that's very much an arms race. Here's where I think Georgia fans can kind of take a little comfort and get a little cozy by the fire right now, is a lot of these players are going into the portal. Like Georgia's looking for, hey, we need a safety here. We need an X receiver here. The core of their team, the main thrust of the reason why they're going to win games, that's going to be intact. Other schools are looking for, who's our A1A guy on offense? Who's our quarterback? We see that. Who's our running back? We see that. Other people are looking for core pieces where I think, and I'll be honest with you, Brandon, I look at some of these additions these teams are making, whether it's from schools like Chattanooga or Florida International, or this is a kid from Duke, or this is a kid from North Carolina or Virginia. Like all these kids are pouring into the portal. And I just sit there and go, hey, man, I know Georgia's roster. I think Georgia's guys that everyone is waiting to see are better than those guys. They've just kind of had to wait their turn. Like with Georgia, the exodus of wide receiver, we know that story. Ra Thomas, Colby Young, Michael Jackson III. Those guys are already in the portal, but you see a lot of guys, Arian Smith, Dominic Lovett. Georgia, a lot of those guys, they're players behind them, like Nitro Tuggle, Sokovie White, the guys coming in that, in a lot of these cases, Brandon, you're going to tell me like, okay, Auburn just got another wide receiver, or Alabama just got their third, fourth wide receiver. I still look at it, apples to apples. And I think a lot of the players that Georgia is bringing in, C.J. Wiley, Talon Taylor, Tyler J. Williams, I think those guys are better than a lot of those guys, save for the one big difference of maybe 1 or 2 years of age. And another team has played a lot more games where they play a lot more games, but that's not going to be like playing against Georgia's defense for 6 months, getting ready for next year.
Yeah, but I think we're talking about two different things here for a little bit. I mean, we're talking about, as a fan of college football, you have two things going on at once. You have what you want for your own team, and it seems like Georgia's in pretty good shape right now. I mean, I like the fact, and we've talked about this in the show plenty, that it's been a pretty quiet few days for Georgia, the sort of portal hysteria that seems to be existing other places. That's not going on here. And you're not seeing the huge addition yet, but you're also not seeing the shocking subtraction either. And I think that Georgia fans are sort of happy with that trade-off. But, Jeff, we no longer live in an age in which it's simply enough to sort of be okay with your team. I think there are a lot of Georgia fans, and maybe I'm misreading this. Maybe I'm wrong about this. But I get the impression as we go into tonight and the start of a college football playoff, an expansion that I've been looking forward to, Jeff, am I wrong to say it feels like there's a little bit of a dark cloud over the sport right now? That I don't think people are that excited about these games. The ticket market would suggest they're not. I'm not trying to be like dire and I'm not trying to be doom and gloom because I'm going to be watching. I'm going to be having a good time. But I think the vibe going into the playoff right now is really weird. I think the people are not that jazzed up about this because they're a little bit more fixated with just how crazy the other college football news on an almost continual basis is, and the fact that I don't think anybody thinks there's really any hope of it getting better anytime soon. Tell me I'm wrong on that if I am, and I'll invite the audience to tell me that there too, because, listen, when Georgia gets ready to play, that's going to be awesome. But in terms of the first-round games, the 1 tonight and the 3 tomorrow, I don't see those games dominating the news cycle. I see stuff related to, like, the NIL concerns and the transfer concerns and things like that. I see that sort of sucking the oxygen out of the room ahead of these 4 games this weekend. Am I wrong about that?
Brandon, I think it's kind of just – this is just an abnormal year. I have clear thoughts on this matter. Number one, this is a time when – can you imagine if the only thing you had going on for your football program was really just the transfer portal? Like the Gasparilla Bowl or something like that was the only other thing, and the transfer portal is the bigger news. I mean, that shows you where your football program is in the food chain. In respect to your greater point here, Brandon, I think this is kind of a point that I'm going to look closely at where I think this might be too much. I really do. Like, everybody's like the golden goose of football, and how much can we inflate it, and how much can we get bigger and better. I don't know if bigger here means better. Everybody can say, oh, all these fan bases are connected now. SMU is really fully charged and still plugged in. So is Arizona State. So is Boise State. So is Ohio State, Tennessee, all these schools. It's great for college football. Brandon, the ticket prices don't say that. The venues probably won't say that. The get-in prices don't say that. I wonder what the TV ratings are going to say, Brandon, where I'm wondering, is this just too much, especially around the holiday season, especially after spending and spending and spending to get to December with all the other big games of your season? And then, another really clear thing, Brandon, with all this stuff is, man, they got the wrong teams in these games. Like, these games, the way this 12-team playoff was supposed to be is it was supposed to be you're going to have, Alabama in the playoff bracket this weekend, or you're going to have USC, or you're going to have big name schools in there this week. And you don't have that, Brennan. I think you're just truly missing the true design of these playoffs when, not going to have any disrespect, but everybody's dream of the 12-team playoff was not Indiana and Arizona State and Boise State and SMU. I mean, I never thought, Brandon, that you can take the beauty of the NCAA basketball tournament and make that and Xerox that for this tournament. I think these are totally two different things, especially when you're talking about how excited people are going to get when a 12 seed knocks off a 5 seed. I don't see that, Brandon, because there's such a big difference in this tournament between a 5 seed and a 12 seed.
So let me finish with this, getting back to Georgia here. as Georgia continues its bowl practices post-state championships, a lot of the Georgia signees are now kind of getting ready to kind of go through this too. Many of them, or at least a few of them, are already on campus, I believe. What can you tell us about this, about some of those Georgia signees who are already kind of getting acclimated here and getting ready to get out there and compete during some of these bowl practices, which has been sort of a rite of passage throughout the Kirby Smart era, and I guess every year since we've had the early signing period in our life. But some of that's apparently already starting for Georgia. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I think it's a contrast, Brandon, to what I was saying earlier. Like some of these schools and some of these programs are sitting there going, oh, great, we've got our backup quarterback, or oh, great, we've got another third down possession receiver because we're a little light there. Georgia, over the past 2 days, Brandon, I think Isaiah Gibson shows up today. Elias Williams was practicing yesterday. Todd Robinson was practicing yesterday. I think Dominic Kelly has been there all week. You have this wave of talent coming in where it's almost like I'm sure the players on the team are like, man, that guy could go for us this weekend, or that is a definite upgrade to the room. I guess I would call it the renewal. But what you really see is a lot of these guys are having their welcome to SEC moments, trying to block like a Michael Williams, or trying to get past a KJ Bolden or a Malachi Starks, or trying to cover, some premier Georgia players right now. And that's just going to be so great for the future of Georgia football. But the exciting part, I go back to that term, the renewal. Like everybody else is spending a lot of money to see their talent base go way up this week. And Georgia is just kind of welcoming them in. A lot of them are checking into the hotel in Athens, and they're moving to Athens, or a lot of them are coming on the 26th. But you're seeing a lot of the early enrollees, even like we checked on this like a couple of weeks ago, Brandon, and now there are guys like Dontrell Glover that weren't expected to be early enrollees. And we did this reporting like last week on these guys, and now Dontrell is planning to come and be in Athens as well. I've swapped messages with like JJ Hane. He's planning to be in Athens quickly after he takes a trip to Germany for Christmas and then comes back to the States. Like almost all this recruiting class is going to be there or already been there. They're practicing and they're already getting immersed into Georgia football, and they get to see it, I think, at the peak time of Georgia when everybody's locked in and they're chasing another championship.
Jeff, good stuff. Hope you enjoy the games this weekend. Obviously, the Christmas season approaching here, too. Hope you and your family are getting ready to enjoy all of that as well. Have a great weekend. We'll look forward to having you back here very soon on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
See you, BA. Hey, have a good weekend, everybody.
You too.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I want to talk more about this coming up, what I was addressing with Jeff a moment ago. And if I'm wrong, I want to know, because sometimes all you have is your own perception, your own intuition. So if I'm wrong about this, please tell me. We'll do more about that here in just a little bit. Let me remind you for now, though, we're cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, how much enthusiasm exists for tonight's first-round playoff games? You can debate that. There is no lack of enthusiasm, though, when it comes to Royal Caribbean here in 2025. The excitement of Icon of the Seas sailing out of the port of Miami. By the way, speaking of Miami, we'll be looking forward to being there. Maybe for the Orange Bowl coming up here pretty soon. And maybe, who knows, maybe I'll go hop on a cruise ship right after that and get ready to enjoy all of that from the gorgeous port of Miami. Obviously, the cool stuff going down with Utopia of the Seas there, too. And all the unbelievable sort of specialty restaurants you get a chance to enjoy. If you've never cruised before, if it's been a long time since you've cruised, this is one of the things that's probably changed the most about Royal Caribbean in recent years is the advent of all these like really nice specialty restaurants, the kind of thing that would be like sort of a five-star experience on land that you're having on the cruise ship. I love Giovanni's Table. It's sort of a classic kind of old world Italian style restaurant. And, you know, on Utopia of the Seas, they've sort of positioned it on the ship where it's like, it's 2 levels, it's delicious food, it's got a gorgeous view looking out over the huge windows, kind of down onto like the boardwalk area of the ship there. Just a really fun space, delicious food, and there's all kinds of specialty restaurants like that on all these Royal Caribbean ships. So Jessica Slater's a great travel agent. She can tell you about that. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. She will tell you about all of that. So let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I went to ESPN.com. I have it on my phone here right now. So these are the headlines for for ESPN right now. Let's sort of count this. You've got the story about Beck we referenced earlier. You've got Isaiah Bond not playing for Texas. So those are both like CFP stories. But you've also got headline about the weird five-star recruit from Oregon who's been released to now go to Florida. You've got, Oklahoma landing a quarterback out of the transfer portal. You've got Dabo Swinney taking his first player out of the transfer portal. It seems like, I don't know, like I said before, if I'm wrong about this, y'all tell me. If the enthusiasm exists in greater numbers than I'm giving it credit for, let me know. But it seems like some of the portal NIL stuff that sort of dominates the stories and the headlines as of late, that's kind of encroaching in on what ought to be, I think, unbridled enthusiasm in the college football playoff. Now, when you get to January 1st and the real teams start playing, well, obviously, that's all going to change, and Georgia fans will be as excited as ever. And maybe some of this just sort of speaks to a lot of these teams playing the first round deep down don't really believe they can win a national championship. And that's why they're expecting so few people when Penn State takes on SMU, or maybe even Texas hosting Clemson with the tickets not exactly hot right now. Maybe Texas fans just don't really believe in their chance to win here this year. Maybe that's what some of that is. But can't help but notice that the mood around the playoff is not exactly what I would have expected to be, at least for these first-round games. So for a sport that's kind of trying to figure a lot about its future out, it has mortgaged a lot of that future betting big on this expanding college football playoff. College football needs a good weekend this weekend. It needs it to look good tonight in South Bend, and it needs to have 3 good games tomorrow competing against the NFL, which is also airing too. A lot of that's going to be, kind of out there to be understood. By the way, speaking of tonight, we've got photographic evidence coming out of South Bend, Indiana. One of the things that always looks good on TV, especially when we get the NFL playoff time of year, is snow. We don't normally get that for college football, but in South Bend right now, as the Fighting Irish has shared on social media, they do have a lot of snow on the ground there at Notre Dame Stadium. So I do think that makes perhaps for a lot of fun here tonight. So I'm going to give you kind of a simple point on all 4 of these games here for a moment. I like all 4 favorites to win. And I'm going to take 3 of the favorites to cover. Let me start with Notre Dame against Indiana. Fact of the matter is that Notre Dame has the worst loss of any of the teams in the college football playoff when it lost to Northern Illinois. But for 2 years now, against lesser competition, Notre Dame hasn't just been winning, they've been dominating. Now, I don't know what that means when they play Georgia coming up. My guess is it'll be, similar to the kind of games that Georgia's played against Notre Dame in the past. Georgia finds a way to win them. But I do believe that Notre Dame is far better than any team, with the exception of Ohio State, far better than any team that Indiana has played all year long. Closest, perhaps, probably to Michigan, which was kind of a sort of a middle-tier Big Ten team, and Indiana was sort of, barely won that game. I have a sneaking suspicion that tonight's game won't be all that close. At the very least, the spread we're going with here, Notre Dame minus 6.5. I think the Fighting Irish probably cover that pretty easily. When you move to tomorrow, the one underdog that I could at least see covering the spread is probably Tennessee. And if the ball bounces right, I think that Tennessee could win this game. I really do. I think that Tennessee is a dangerous team in this playoff. I think really both these teams are pretty dangerous. By far and away, to me, the best game to be played this weekend is Tennessee-Ohio State. I told you before, I think that Ohio State is undervalued. People have a tendency to sort of fixate on the last thing they saw. The last thing they saw was Ohio State not looking very good. But the totality of data points for the season would suggest this is still as talent-rich as virtually anybody in college football. Their defense is incredibly salty. Their offense, to be honest with you, kind of leaves a little bit to be desired. Will Howard has sort of had about the year we assumed he might have, but that doesn't mean they don't still have some potency on that side of the ball. Offensive line has been an issue, but we assume that Ohio State at least wins the game against Tennessee. I could see Tennessee covering. In fact, I'll take Tennessee plus the points, but I do believe the spread is large enough that while Vols may cover, I think Ohio State probably wins, and I do believe that Ohio State probably advances on that half of the bracket. To kind of play spoiler alert here for a moment, my pick to play for the national championship is Georgia against Ohio State. I believe the season is going to end the same way it started back in the summer when we spent so much time Georgia compared to Ohio State, Georgia compared to Ohio State, Georgia compared to Ohio State. When it's all said and done on January 20th, I think it's those same 2 teams again. I believe that Georgia's going to play Ohio State for the national championship. And frankly, the toughest game that Ohio State has along this run maybe tonight against Tennessee, or I should say tomorrow against Tennessee. But I believe they'll win it, and I believe they'll advance after that. Penn State, SMU. Penn State's a pretty big favorite, 8.5 points. Look, the bottom line is, to go back to the sort of interest thing here for a moment, I think what you're seeing when it comes to the sort of depressed interest in this game around state colleges is it's not a big football game if SMU is in it. It's just not. SMU's got a fine record. They're one of the better teams in the ACC. It's a program because of all the, I guess, oil money in Texas. They do have some, donor support, but it's not a big-time football program. It's not a big-time game. James Franklin's record against highly ranked teams is abysmal, but this is the sort of paper tiger I believe he's likely to feast on. And so I assume at home Penn State plays well, and I assume they probably handle SMU pretty easily, at least easy enough. I just think that while SMU's not a bad football team, they just haven't played a team of Penn State's caliber all season long, and I think that probably shows. I think that Texas-Clemson's a pretty interesting game in that when Texas played Georgia, it had a hard time with Georgia's lines of scrimmage, especially the defensive line of scrimmage. Well, Clemson has a very good defensive front too, and Clemson can get after quarterbacks, and Quinn Ewers is the sort of quarterback that you can kind of get after. A lot of stuff with him is just really slow developing, and Ewers just has not had that great of a year. It's interesting to me that this is the largest of all the point spreads, given the fact that, I think that with Klubnik on offense and what, Hood does defense, there is, I think, at least some threat that Clemson probably poses to Texas. Ultimately, I believe that Texas probably covers this spread. I just think they're deeper on both sides of the ball and probably far better. But you kind of wonder, is Steve Sarkisian really going to let this season end without really finding out what Arch Manning could do if he took the reins of this offense? They have no Isaiah Bond. That's one dynamic playmaker they won't have. That we would just say that any kind of Texas team with Quinn Ewers at quarterback is not going to win the national championship. And the results against elite competition will be pretty similar to what they were twice against Georgia. You're competitive, but you're not really winning. And Arch Manning's inexperience may prevent him from winning too. But if you're Texas, don't you have to try at some point in time, at least experiment with it? They didn't do it against Georgia. They stuck with Quinn Ewers. Will they do that for the entirety of this playoff? I am pretty fascinated by that. So bottom line for me is I'll take Notre Dame to win and cover, Texas to win and cover, Penn State to win and cover. I'll take Ohio State to win, but Tennessee to cover. So I got all four favorites winning, 3 of those also covering, expecting a lot of chalk in the college football playoff first round. So we'll see how that goes. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, coming up here in a moment, I want to celebrate some really good news for another Georgia team outside of the world of football. But prior to that, let me give a shout-out as well to our friends at Lassiter Tractor. Down in South Georgia, man, there's nobody doing a better job of taking care of folks when it comes to their compact utility tractor needs than our friends at Lassiter Tractor. They've been South Georgia's hometown John Deere dealer since 1956. They're offering great deals for you on whatever your sort of plot of land is. If you're a small ag or a large ag, well, like whatever that is for you, they've got a John Deere compact utility tractor to get the job done for you. In fact, they've been doing that with John Deere, as I said before, going back to the 1950s. So if you're like, 5 acres or less, you may be able to get one of those John Deere Series 1 tractors. That's, for sort of a good fit for that property size. Or if you've got a much larger tract of land, you may want one of those John Deere Series 4 tractors. This is the king of compacts. It's got the most horsepower of any of these compact utility tractors. So if you're trying to get and take care of some really large land, that might be a good option for you. Plus, they can also, kind of customize any of these with the attachments like the loader bucket or the any of the kind of stuff that kind of goes on there with that. So find them online for more details. It's LassiterEQ.com. That's LASSETER, LassiterEQ.com to find out more about South Georgia's hometown John Deere dealer. You're going to love all of that. Now, let's get ready to transition to our long finish here, presented by the Finnish Long Drink. Did you see Georgia absolutely blast Buffalo in basketball last night? That may not sound like all that much of a accomplishment necessarily. They were up 20-something to begin the game, winning by like 50. I mean, like they were all over Buffalo here in this game. New transfer addition kind of made his debut. It seems like he made a big impact. You know, what they're doing in the front court right now with Newell, the 5-star, and the other big man they got down there. Still learning all the names. Very, very impressive. And I thought after the game, Georgia coach Mike White really, I think, laid out the fact that they're not shying away from ambition as you get ready to begin SEC play. I think this is really good stuff. This is from last night, Mike White, after Georgia really got another dominant non-conference win in this sort of pre-conference season. This is what Mike White said after the game.
Yeah, no, I've not shied away from that. I think we're going to be competitive in our league. I've said that since June. We're significantly better than we were a year ago. We just are. A lot of teams in our league are too, though. And we've got 16 teams hovering in the top, 60 to 70 in Ken Palm, which is just ridiculous. But that's why these guys came here. That's why most of these guys sign in the SEC to play against the best.
So I think that's really good news. And I'm telling you, when Georgia gets these SEC games because of how good the league is, I think it's going to be really entertaining basketball. Now, we're still going to be like 99% football. We're just a football show. That's what we do. But I do believe this basketball team is worth your attention here right now. Now, let me also kind of point out something that White also mentions there, which is as Georgia has gotten better, so has the rest of the SEC. That, right now Georgia has absolutely the look of a tournament team. Their resume is tournament worthy, and all of the sort of bracketology stuff you're going to see right now, kind of pre-conference, will have Georgia in the field. And if they keep playing like this, they're going to be a threat to make the top 25. But I thought, you guys know who John Rothstein is? He's a famous college basketball analyst type guy. He's the one that always does the "This is March" tweets, if you remember that over the years. I thought Rothstein yesterday had a really good word of warning about what the SEC is about to be. Because, look, if you watch the SEC-ACC Challenge, the SEC swept the whole thing. You had South Carolina beat Clemson the other day. You had another SEC team beat North Carolina, I believe, too. I mean, you've just got SEC's just cleaning house these pre-conference games, non-conference contests. But what Rothstein put out, and this is where you got to be careful if you're Georgia, because your success coinciding with other SEC team success just means the league is going to get deeper and tougher. What Rothstein wrote was, a big thing to remember when a league is loaded like the SEC is right now from top to bottom, the bottom becomes capable of eating the middle. That means fewer teams could actually make the NCAA tournament. Something to keep in mind when everyone starts playing, everybody in league play. This is only December. So keep that in mind. I think that's a wise word from John Rothstein, which is that while almost everybody in the SEC kind of goes into the upcoming conference season with probably more tournament aspirations, certainly in the case of Georgia, they've had in quite some time, the sheer number of tournament-worthy contenders could actually reduce the number of teams that make the field because they could all beat each other up. But honestly, based on the way that Georgia's playing right now, based on the way in which they're blocking shots and getting rebounds and doing what they're doing, honestly, it may be these other teams more worried about Georgia than Georgia is worried about them right now. That's how good Georgia's playing at the moment. And that is the long finish presented by the Finish Long Drink. Now, you're enjoying some great holiday parties this time of year, getting ready to celebrate Christmas with your family and friends, or just getting ready to watch some college football playoff action. The Finish Long Drink is going to taste great with all of that. Whether it's the Long Drink Zero, no carbs, no sugar, the cranberry. My wife still loves that as much as ever. I love the blue can. It's the traditional citrus, the grapefruit flavor, the gin kick, the peach flavored version here in the Peach State. Folks love that. Long drink, strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. There is a long drink variety for you. So make sure you try some today. It's online, thelongdrink.com. You can put in your zip code there. You can find out where you can pick some up. And you'll be able to enjoy it, have a great holiday time of year with all of that. So make sure you check out the Finish Long Drink today. All right, couple of golden shoes to give out. Ironically, neither person aware of the other. We can bring that music down just a little bit. Neither person aware of the other. A couple of dog fans and viewers, listeners to our program enjoying some pretty nice travel right now, which makes me jealous of both. We'll show you the first one here. Josh Henry writes in from Key West to say, BA, I'm traveling again, and of course, repping the dogs and DawgNation. This time at the southernmost point in the continental U.S., right here in Key West. He says, if you've never been here, you got to check it out. I know you'd love it. Hashtag Go Dogs. You'd love to see the G popping up there. Hashtag Golden Shoe. If you look at Josh's picture, if you're watching a video, you do see the DawgNation t-shirt. Love to see that from Josh. Really appreciate that. Love to see him down there in Key West. where it's warm and sunny. Good stuff there from Josh. Now, another golden shoe also going out here to DawgNation on X, who writes in to say, very different type of trip, on top of a 12,000-foot mountain while skiing on vacation in Telluride. It's in Colorado. Today, I came across a player on the football team from 2008 through 2012. One of us had a nice hat. The other had a nice jersey. Dogs on top of skiing as well as football. So DawgNation having a good time there. You love to see all of those great Georgia fans enjoying all of that wonderful travel and sharing that with us as a part of DawgNation Daily and our Golden Shoes. So Golden Shoes going out to everybody having a good time this time of year. Enjoy all that great travel. Lousy, stinking Gators, the only place they're traveling to is the, I don't know. I guess they're going to some, who knows where they're going. But they're not going anywhere anytime soon as it relates to Georgia. Just 1,504 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. We will hope you all have a great weekend, and we will see you Monday. We will be here for a show on Monday, just like always. Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn 2-4. Your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs, they show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. All right, I've got YouTube pulled up here on my laptop. I may have to do a combination of both laptop and phone today, but we'll have a good time no matter what. Oh, Florida's got a bowl game today. So your big-time college football when you're playing like 5 days before Christmas. Nothing, unless it's the college football playoff, nothing speaks of big-time bowl game more so than that. All right, so it's 3:30, the Gasparilla Bowl against Tulane for Florida. So there you go. I was not aware of that. Normally, I'm pretty good about knowing the early season bowl games. I don't know. I got so much going on these days. I swear. I mean, listen, it's all great. I love my job. I love my family. I love, all the stuff that goes with it. But I don't think I got room for anything else in my life right now. I really don't. I really, really don't. Paul Moon calls Ryan Day the most overrated coach in the country by far. We're about to find that out because, Ross Bjork, the Ohio State athletic director, says he is returning for next year. But, oh, boy, you lose that game. All of a sudden you're talking about something really, really different in terms of the chatter. Maybe at that point in time, Ryan Day sort of volunteers, no pun intended, to look at something, doing something a little bit different because no doubt the quality of life would be reduced greatly if there's another embarrassing loss, especially if that were to happen at home tonight. G. Gray says, stop the Tennessee run game. You can win easily. Obviously to agree, that's what they want to try to do. And given what I've seen from Nico this year, I probably would try to put as much pressure on him in this game as I possibly could. I believe that's probably true. I'll also say that, to me, the biggest advantage for Tennessee in the game is not what Samson does on the ground. It's what the Tennessee defensive front can do to Ohio State. Tennessee is a very good defense. I think they're a very good defense, especially up front. Tennessee's lines of scrimmage, both their lines of scrimmage are pretty good. I give them a chance to win. I just think Ohio State's probably the better of the two teams, but I do give Tennessee a chance to win. El Rail says, Florida's in the Gasoline Bowl. Not quite the Gasoline Bowl. It's the Gasparilla Bowl, which is in Tampa, right? Gasparilla's in Tampa, is that right? One of a couple of Tampa Bowls. DOT says, it is weird seeing all the SEC schools banned behind Tennessee, but I understand it. We are the most hated. I guess a little bit of a reference to Georgia being hated there. It seems like there's some of that, yeah. Lance D wondering how well Ryan Day's hair dye is going to hold up in those snowy conditions. Yeah, do you see it start to sort of leak off? It's a very good question. Paul Moon says he doesn't think that Day's actually the most overrated coach. He says they're just an annoying fan in here. Well, listen, whatever it takes to win the argument. Whatever it takes to win the argument. Let me go over to DawgNation.com for a minute. We'll see how they are doing. Jason Ray checking in. Very funny from him. Let's see what's happening over at DawgNation.com for a moment here there as well. Garrison Tucker says, what's Clemson's game plan to beat Texas? Dabo's the only other coach in the college football playoff with a national title. It is an interesting point. And I do think, to a degree, Clemson deserves some credit for this. That the same way we would kind of say for Georgia, hey, college football's changing, but here Georgia is kind of right there where they've always been. like, Clemson, which was a fixture, they made, 6 playoffs in a row from 2015 through 2020? Is that right? Well, here they are in the first year of the expanded playoff. They're right back there, too, as the ACC champ. So Dabo, I believe, does deserve some credit for that. As far as what their path to victory is here tonight, I think it's 2 things. I think the Clemson pass rush could have success against Quinn Ewers, using some of the similar path to what Georgia had. The Clemson front 7 altogether is pretty good. Their linebackers are really good. I also think for Cade Klubnik, there's a little bit of a homecoming for him. He is a state of Texas guy. I think that Klubnik could just outplay Quinn Ewers. I really do. Now, ultimately, I think that Texas is probably just the better and the deeper team. Look, watching the SEC championship, while I was very happy that Georgia won, I thought Texas was a pretty good team. I really did. I don't like a lot of the hype around Texas and some of the, what I almost think is a very favorable sort of entrance into the SEC has been kind of annoying here for the Longhorns. Overall, I still think Texas is a pretty good team. So I'm assuming they probably handle Clemson. But the 2 things I think that Clemson could have going for it is a pass rush, and Klubnik just may be a better quarterback than Quinn Ewers. I mean, he just might be. And outplaying Ewers tomorrow would certainly give them a chance to win that. Let's see what else. More from DawgNation.com. Let's try that. Senior Dog 54 and the subject of Michael Penix tomorrow. I'm actually going to the Falcons game on Sunday. Our buddy Jonathan from Dr. Pepper's invited my son and me to go. So we're going to get a chance to see the start of the Penix era. And the Falcons are wearing the red helmets tomorrow on Sunday, which I'm excited about too. So we're looking forward to that. Yard Dog says he thinks the basketball team is certainly better and he loves Mike White, but the real judgment is going to come halfway through the SEC schedule. Yeah, I mean, it is just a fact of life that Georgia's emergence is coinciding with a lot of teams playing very well in the SEC right now, where there's just not going to be a lot of easy outs in that conference. But that doesn't mean that Georgia necessarily has to take a back seat to any of that either. That in the past, we've seen Georgia have a couple of moments in the pre-conference play and sort of give it away in conference. When this team is playing as well as it is in the front court right now, that's the kind of thing that kind of travels. Is it Cyril? Is that the guy's name that plays opposite Newell? Is it Sumto Cyril? Is that how you say it? I'm still learning all these dudes' names. But he's a big shot-blocking dude. Newell is a real deal as the former 5-star. I like the team. The new guy they brought in last night, it seems like he's pretty good. Yeah, so right now, our producer, Jay Black, says that ESPN would have them as an 8 seed. Now, that's kind of like those early playoff rankings where there's that. A lot of that is subject to change, but that's not like just sort of sneaking into the field. That's pretty solidly in there. Randy Hall mentioning Zachariah and Zion Branch. We talked about that a little earlier. Let's see what else. UGA Marine says that Klubnik way outplayed Ewers in the high school state title game. So I knew that Klubnik had won a state title in Texas. I guess I didn't fully realize that he'd beaten Ewers in that. So that's interesting, Marine. I appreciate that. Let me see if I can pull up Facebook here. Let's see if that'll work for us. Have not been there yet today. Oh, how about this? So Patrick McColgan says that word up here in C-Bus is the stadium isn't ready for the game Saturday. Apparently all the CDAC bathrooms aren't working. They wanted it in the cold, and they're getting what they wanted. It is kind of interesting, isn't it? And I'm assuming, like, I don't know the first thing about plumbing, so I'm about to embarrass myself. But do you have to do something to, like, winterize the pipes in a situation like that if you're a big stadium like that? That's pretty wild if so. And it does seem that a lot of, like, the chatter of, oh, y'all got to come up here and play us in the cold. But it doesn't seem like the people up there are very excited about that either. Like, they're not going to the game at Penn State. And, you know, at Ohio State, it's like the thing I've pointed out before is, like, a lot of these guys that play for Ohio State or play for Penn State, they've never played games in the cold either. That their high school season would have ended way before that. The college season's in, you know, pretty early. That doesn't even up north. It doesn't get real cold until around this time of year, and they're not usually playing in cold weather environments this time of year. So even northern kids aren't playing a lot of cold weather football unless you play for the Buffalo Bills in the playoff or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, as our commenter mentioned, it's like they all talked a big game about wanting to play in the cold, but the plumbing's not working, the fans aren't showing up. Like, it seems like they hate the cold weather as bad as much as the rest of us do. That's really interesting. Really interesting. Let me see if I can check out Facebook. But I am fascinated to see how it all goes. And I do believe that we are an Ohio State win away from this narrative all changing pretty quickly in terms of, what the rest of this playoff looks like, things like that. I would definitely have my eye on Ohio State tomorrow night. I really would. Let me see if I can pull up Facebook on my phone here for a minute. Let's see how folks are doing there. On Facebook, by the way, how about shout out to Ladd McConkey last night? Another great performance by him. He's had an amazing rookie season. For all the attention that Brock Bowers justified beginning, McConkey's been awesome too. Brian Whitaker says, I remember when you didn't play a bowl game on New Year's Day, it was considered a successful season. Yeah, I mean, look, the expectations have changed mildly. They certainly have. Let's see what else. Ken Holcomb says that Mike White's building a good round ball team. He's got the local Gilmer County 7'2", 245-pound center Jackson McVeigh. That's right. Yeah, you'd love to see that. You'd love to see that come into the program. David Oak says that my wife said the Gasparilla Bowl sounds like something you'd order at a Cuban restaurant, which is very funny. Joseph Kennedy also says that the 12-team playoff makes the regular bowls horrendous. The matchups, the stupid tie-ins. Yeah, so like the regular bowls are kind of a mess. You don't really know who's playing, but the games themselves are still really entertaining. Like, so that's the one thing that college football sort of always has going for it, is like the product itself remains really entertaining no matter what. I think that's, it's like for as much as sometimes you don't know who's playing and stuff like that, the games themselves are still usually pretty good. And by the way, we have had a lot less opt-outs here this year, a lot less opt-outs. Yeah, I'm also being told that Ohio State's got 40 players from warm weather, which I'm not surprised by. Like, these guys don't want to play in the cold. No, nobody wants to play in the cold. Nobody wants to play. It's not like they're more ready for the cold than Tennessee is. Plus, it gets cold in Tennessee in the wintertime anyway. All right, let's do a couple more. We're going to get ready to go. Okay, yeah, so Bill Sanders, I like it when one commenter confirms the report of another commenter. So we now have two sources confirming. Bill Sanders saying that 3/4 of the bathrooms at Ohio Stadium have frozen over and burst, I guess you'd say. Is it bust or burst? Either way, they've exploded. You got to get R.S. Sanders up there. I mean, you got to get R.S. Sanders on the way to Columbus. Can you imagine what a disaster that's going to be? Like, I mean, can you play in those conditions? Like, what are they going to do? Because, it's like over the course of 4 hours, people will have to go to the bathroom. What are they going to do? That's pretty wild. It's pretty wild and just an absolute disaster. Gosh, that makes me so happy. Oh, my gosh, that makes me so happy. All these Big Ten teams wanted to host these games. Talking about the SEC coming up there. You guys, we're going to get you up here in the cold. And they can't even get the stadium operations right. That makes me very, very happy. I find that to be very funny. I find that to be very, very funny. I want to learn more details on that. Let me get a couple of YouTube comments here, too. Guy ATL says that way too many favorites being picked this weekend. There'll be at least 2 upsets. So you may be right. You may be right. But let me tell you why I'm taking favorites. And by the way, we've taken underdogs all throughout the regular season. We've cleaned house. So we're not just Joey Square here taking them nothing but favorites all the time. We pick our spots pretty well for the most part. 14 games over 500 documented for the season. Two things. A, the history of the college football playoff, at least pre-national championship, national semifinal, all we've had before, not a lot of history of outright upsets winning. And sometimes trends don't really matter. The reason why we think this trend does is, and Jeff Sentell sort of touched on this, the reason why we think the trend of favorites winning the semifinal games could perhaps carry over to these games is I think it all ties back to they just picked the wrong teams to be in the field. They just don't. They're not good at picking the teams to make the playoff. And so, therefore, what the predominant storyline of most college football playoff games have been, a lot of blowouts. And the reason why there are blowouts is because the people who pick the teams are not good at doing so. We always judge the quality, if you like golf, we always judge the quality of a golf course by the winner that it produces, by the competition that it produces. And the college football playoff has not always produced the best in competition. We have seen a lot of lopsided games. And so we're going to assume that the same faulty logic that's produced blowouts in the past would at least produce comfortable margins tonight and tomorrow. And we may adjust that thinking as you kind of move towards the quarters and the semis, but maybe not in all cases. So there is a reason we are on the favorites here this week. And Dog asking about where I got my sweatshirt. So the truth is, I've mentioned this before. There's a company from years ago that had a bunch of sort of retro styled stuff. The famous BA's cardigan that I wear sometimes that people kind of like. All of this came from the same place, and the store has gone out of business, unfortunately. So I don't believe you can get this stuff anywhere anymore. Jonathan Aaron says, have you sat down and thought about how much harder the media job is going to get in North Carolina with Bill Belichick being the coach? Also, do you think it'd be a funny conversation between Dabo Swinney and Bill Belichick? So I have a prediction on this, and Jonathan, see if I'm not right about this. I don't believe that Bill Belichick is going to do the we're on to Cincinnati routine at North Carolina. I don't think he's going to. If you ever watch one of those football documentaries, Belichick is usually pretty good on those. Belichick likes talking about football. I think a lot of times with those Patriots press conferences, he was playing a character. I don't think he's going to play that same character at North Carolina for the simple reason that what Belichick really wants is to coach in the NFL again. He's really, really close to becoming the all-time winningest coach. And of course, anybody who had a chance to be the winningest coach in NFL history, of course, you'd want to. Belichick's, I believe, I'm not going to say too much about this. I don't believe it's by accident that Belichick isn't coaching in the NFL. I think that there are a lot of people in the NFL who were unhappy with Bill Belichick. I'm not going to explain that further. But I think that Belichick probably, whether explicitly or just implicitly, I think Belichick was sort of told, we're going to need you to sit a few plays out. I don't think that Belichick was invited to coach in the NFL right now. And for the foreseeable future, I don't believe that he will be. But I think he wants to coach again in the NFL. He has a very small buyout at North Carolina. It would be easy for him to move to the NFL. All of this is just a total sideshow. I think North Carolina should be embarrassed for agreeing to do this. Belichick, I believe, is only interested in being there until he gets the NFL opportunity again. But as a way of perhaps, reducing the friction for a potential NFL return, I think we're going to see the sort of happy, joyful version of Bill Belichick to the extent that exists. I think we're going to see more of that. I don't think he's going to do the gruff, grunting, two-word answer press conference. I believe he's going to be a lot more friendly and a lot more affable, a little bit more like what you've seen from the Tom Brady roast and stuff like that. I think that's the version of himself he wants to show here because I think he wants an NFL job again. And right now, I think the NFL is choosing to keep him at arm's length for reasons I won't explain. TD Dog says this hoodie's from Distant Replays. So this is not from Distant Replays. I do know Distant Replays, but this hoodie's not from Distant Replays. Let's see what else. Paul Moon says he gives Belichick a season and a half. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be successful at North Carolina at all. And I think one of the things you've seen a few things in the news lately. Like, do y'all see I meant to talk about this in the show. We just never had time to. Did y'all see the Adam Schefter thing the other day about Michael Vick going to Sacramento State because Sacramento State had supposedly $50 million in NIL money? Like, do you know how stupid you would have to be to believe that? And I don't mean to be, like, I hate to say it that way, but do you know how dumb you'd have to be to believe that was true, that Sacramento State has $50 million in NIL? Of course, it's now verifiably untrue because Deion didn't take that. Not Deion. Michael Vick, who's trying to be the next Deion, kind of leaving the player ranks to come to the coaching ranks, didn't take that job. He took Norfolk State instead, which kind of gives you an idea of how not true the Sacramento State thing likely was. The point is, what we have right now is a lot of people, national media types, things like that, who are showing you how little they really know about college football. The idea that something like that could even be true, I think, is laughable. And the same people who would maybe think that Sacramento State's got $50 million in NIL to spend are also telling you that Bill Belichick's going to come down here and, basically make a college football program into an NFL factory, as if Georgia wasn't already doing that. And the truth is, more than just Georgia. I mean, Alabama, Ohio State, teams like that are also pretty similar, at least they have been in the past. This notion that somehow they're going to be all about player development, getting you ready for the NFL, and it's going to be sort of a one-stop shop for these NFL teams. Yeah, I've heard a little something or another about that in the past. I just think it's amazing that as popular as college football is, you have these sort of certain media personality types with pretty large profiles that don't seem to understand the sport at all. It'd be like me talking about hockey. It's really amazing. All right, let's do a couple more and we'll get ready to go. Let us see what else. One or two more, we're going to go. Philip Jordan Wells always has funny stuff. He has got a play on A Christmas Carol in here, which is pretty funny. Yeah, Bill Sanders says they forgot to drip their pipes at Ohio State. Yeah, I mean, like, what do you do up there when it gets so cold? Because you got to imagine it gets cold enough there that just dripping the pipes alone is not enough, right? I am so glad I don't live up north. Oh, my gosh, I'm so glad I don't live up north. Boy, am I glad I don't live up north. Bo C. Fuss says, I've got complete confidence in Stockton. He's going to lead us to the championship. I mean, what I have complete confidence in, and I've made this clear, I think some of the hype and love for Gunner has made me a little nervous. Some of it has sort of felt like a little bit too much of a reaction to the most recent data point for Georgia, and some of it sort of felt like sometimes there's a lot of energy around what you sort of really want to be true. And so I've been, y'all will know, a little skeptical about some of this, even though I'm a very big fan of Stockton, generally speaking. What I have confidence, though, in is that can Gunner do what needs to be done along with a lot of other position groups doing what needs to be done, too. That is really what the best recipe for Georgia has been, a quarterback that contributes alongside other position groups. And it's never going to be about any one person because Georgia at its best has never really been that way. And so do I have confidence that Gunner can fit in that way? Yeah, I do. I really do. And the fact that other Georgia players show so much confidence in him, that I think makes me more confident too. And I think any of us would sort of be wise to sort of feel the same way. Garrison Tucker wondering if maybe Nitro Tuggle gets a chance to play some of the slot during the playoff. Perhaps that's the case. He obviously comes back to Georgia, when maybe there had been some rumors he might be looking elsewhere or something like that. Perhaps that's the case. Yeah, Eugene Marine. Yeah, Vic took the Norfolk State job. So the $50 million NIL stuff from Sacramento State did not apparently exist, which we sort of already realized. All right. DT also pointing out that Christmas kind of encroaches on the playoff. That kind of impacts the ticket demand. I think some of that's probably true, too. I do. I mean, even for me, I mean, I love the games. I'm excited about them. But we've got Christmas gifts to buy. We've got, traditions that we're trying to sort of celebrate. And figuring out a way to get, like, what is essentially 16 hours of football also crammed into all of that. It's not easy. It's not easy. I think that is true. It'd be kind of nice if the playoffs maybe could start a little earlier, maybe. That might be nice, although I don't know. Either way, we're going to go for now. Hope you all have a great weekend. Enjoy it tonight. Enjoy it tomorrow. We'll come back and talk about it on Monday. And then as you look at the next week, we'll be live on Monday. No show at all Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. We'll have a live show like normal on the 26th, and we'll have something a little special for you on the 27th. So we're going to have plenty of DawgNation Daily next week. And then after that, we are in New Orleans for the College Football Playoff. So and the Sugar Bowl. So get ready for all of that. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews. Really, they need to be up. Hopefully, Dari's on his way to Columbus right now. One of those R.S. Andrews trucks, and see if we can get their bathrooms figured out so they can host a playoff game. I mean, you talk about a program that just can't hardly do anything right these days. You got Michigan planting a flag in the middle of the field. You got the plumbers kind of planting we call that the snake. Got to plant the snake in the middle of the pipes. You got a lot of problems there in Columbus here right now. But R.S. Andrews can fix them all for you. And if you got your own plumbing emergency, they can take care of you as well. Find them online, rsandrews.com. That's rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that today. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then.